Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. We love to grab some really interesting sources and kind of pick them apart.
Yeah.
And today we have something particularly fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to be really into this one.
I think so.
We are talking about Hannibal Lecter.
Ooh.
Now, of course, we all know Hannibal Lecter.
That's the brilliant.
Cannibalistic killer from The Silence of the Lambs.
Oh.
But we are
That's
going
so smart.
deeper than that.
Yes, we are.
We're not just doing a typical movie review.
Right.
We are looking at a research paper that analyzes Hannibal Lecter through a clinical lens.
It's like watching the movie with a psychiatrist.
Oh, I like that.
Like
you have an expert right there with you.
Yeah. So we're going to get into that. And first and foremost, this paper points out something that I think a lot of people might have already thought.
Right.
And that is
Yeah.
that Hannibal Lecter fits the criteria for antisocial personality disorder.
ASPD.
There.
Yeah.
All right. So the paper goes on to say
Yeah.
that it's not just throwing this label out there.
Right.
It is actually using the DSM-5.
Uh-huh.
So
The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
I was going to say.
Like the Bible.
The big book.
For mental health
Yeah.
professionals.
Yeah, for those of us who aren't mental health professionals, who haven't necessarily
Right.
read through the DSM-5.
Yeah.
Can you give us
Yeah.
the quick and dirty
Yes.
rundown of what ASPD is and how it's more than just being like a jerk?
Oh,
You know?
Yeah, it's definitely more than just being a jerk.
Yeah.
Think about someone who has just a totally skewed moral compass.
Okay.
They can act really charming.
Okay.
They can be very intelligent.
Uh-huh.
But underneath it all, they have this deep disregard for what's right
Okay.
and wrong.
All right.
They completely violate the rights of other people
Yeah.
with zero remorse.
Okay.
And that's where we see this really chilling aspect of this disorder. So not just somebody who cuts me off in traffic.
Exactly.
This is next level.
Totally different.
And the paper does a really good job, I think, of going beyond just saying Hannibal equals ASPD.
Yeah.
They use specific moments from the film to back it up.
Yes, absolutely. Remember that scene where Hannibal
Okay.
has a little encounter with a police officer?
Yeah.
And the way that he acts afterwards, like nothing happened.
Yeah.
Total lack of remorse.
No remorse.
Classic ASPD.
It's like he doesn't even acknowledge it.
It didn't happen.
Yeah, it's fictional.
Of course it's fictional.
But it is rooted in
it's rooted in the reality of the disorder.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating to me because these things that are happening in the film, even though they are fictional,
Right.
you can tell that they did their research.
Yes.
They really
Absolutely.
we're really trying to make this as accurate
Yeah.
as possible,
Mhm.
which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
But it gets really interesting when the paper goes on to talk about the potential causes of Hannibal's ASPD.
Ooh, yeah.
So-
Interesting.
They bring up psychodynamic theory.
Yes.
Can you break that down
Okay, so psychodynamic theory,
for us?
it suggests that your early childhood experiences,
Okay.
especially traumatic ones,
Mm-hmm.
can have a powerful
Right.
shaping effect on your personality.
Yeah.
They leave this imprint on you
Okay.
and they affect how you see the world,
That makes sense.
how you interact with other people.
Yeah.
It makes sense when you think about it.
And when we're talking about Hannibal,
Yes.
he has a very,
A very messed up.
very messed up backstory.
So the film reveals that he witnessed
Yeah.
the murder
Brutal murder
of his parents
of his parents.
as a child.
As a child.
And then his little sister.
And then...
She was cannibalized by the attackers. How could... Right?
You come out of that
Right.
unchanged.
How could you?
So...
Yeah, and that's what the paper's getting at.
Right.
We're not saying any of this excuses Hannibal's actions
No.
as an adult, but when we look at it through psychodynamic theory,
Yeah.
we can start to understand how these early traumas
Yeah.
could have warped his development.
Warped his development.
Witnessing this kind of brutality might have just distorted his sense of empathy.
Okay.
So cruelty just seems normal to him,
Yeah.
even inevitable.
It's almost like
Yeah.
it's not even that he's choosing to do these things.
Yeah.
It's just how he
It's
is.
who he is.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how they
Mm-hmm.
use that to kind of explain
Yes.
his behavior.
Absolutely.
So we have this deeply disturbed individual seemingly beyond redemption.
Right.
And then the paper throws us a curveball,
A real curveball.
which I love.
Yeah.
And they say that even Hannibal Lecter could be treated. No,
Ah.
the twist.
Yeah. This is where it gets good.
Yeah.
That's a great twist.
So where do we go from here?
Well, let's talk about that. Okay, so The paper outlines a few approaches, and we have to remember, we're not talking about magically erasing ASPD.
Right.
It's about managing it.
Okay.
One option they discuss is cognitive therapy.
Okay, so cognitive therapy, that's like where you sit down and talk things out. Could that really make a dent in someone like Hannibal?
Well, it's not just chatting. Cognitive therapy focuses on identifying and changing distorted thought patterns.
Okay.
So like rewiring a computer program.
Okay.
You're finding that faulty code, in Hannibal's case, his warped sense of morality, and try to replace it with healthier patterns of thinking.
I can see how that would be helpful, but Hannibal seems pretty set in his ways, and wouldn't that take a therapist who's basically fearless? I mean, this is Hannibal Lecter.
You're hitting on a key point. The paper acknowledges that finding a therapist capable of handling Hannibal's intellect, not to mention his capacity for manipulation, would be a challenge, to say the least.
That's got to be a small pool of applicants.
Right. Someone who can match his mental agility while also establishing clear boundaries and maintaining a position of authority.
Yeah. What else does the paper suggest?
They also discuss medication, not a cure-all, but potentially a way to manage some of the more volatile aspects of ASPD, like impulsivity or aggression.
So not a magic pill to make him a model citizen, but maybe something to take the edge off.
Exactly. It's about harm reduction, both for the individual and for society. And let's not forget the most obvious form of treatment, in Hannibal's case, imprisonment.
Well, yeah, he's not exactly roaming free to join a group therapy session.
Right, and the paper's clear on this. In Hannibal's case, imprisonment is about containment, protecting others from his very real potential for harm. It's not about rehabilitation in the traditional sense.
It's a sobering reminder that sometimes the best we can do is prevent further harm. But all this talk about Hannibal has me thinking about the other characters in The Silence of the Lambs, particularly Clarice Starling. I mean, she's the one going head-to-head with Hannibal, and she's not exactly your average FBI trainee.
That's such a sharp observation, and it's something the paper touches on, though, briefly. Their focus is on Hannibal, of course, but Clarice's resilience, her ability to navigate such a psychologically charged world, it's remarkable.
Think about it. She's a young woman thrust into this dark world of serial killers and psychological games, yet she holds her own against Hannibal, even uses his twisted tactics to her advantage that takes serious mental fortitude.
It speaks to her intelligence, her empathy for the victims, but also perhaps a certain level of detachment that allows her to compartmentalize the horrors she's witnessing. It's like she's developing her own psychological armor to survive in that environment.
Psychological armor. I love that, the paper focused on Hannibal, but what about Clarice? Could we build a psychological profile of her based on what we see in the film?
Absolutely, and that would be a fascinating deep dive in itself. We could explore her motivations for joining the FBI, her ability to connect with victims while maintaining professional boundaries, her complex, almost adversarial relationship with Hannibal.
And let's not forget that nail-biting scene in Buffalo Bill's basement.
Yeah.
Talk about facing your fears head-on, exploring Clarice's psychology.
Yeah.
Could give us a whole new perspective on the film. Instead of just viewing her as the hero, we could understand the inner workings, the mental strength that allows her to thrive in such a high-pressure, dangerous world.
Exactly. It would be a deep dive into resilience, determination, and maybe even a touch of darkness that allows her to confront the darkness in others.
Okay, so we've unpacked Hannibal's psyche, and now we're left with a whole new set of questions about Clarice. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion only to find another onion underneath.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about these deep dives. They always leave me wanting to know more.
That's the beauty of exploring human psychology through the lens of film. It opens up these conversations, encourages us to think critically about the characters and their motivations, and ultimately to reflect on our own psychological makeup.
Yeah, it really is. Like we said, it's like we have this decoder ring now for understanding not just these characters,
right,
but real people.
Yeah.
We all know people who
for sure
are difficult.
Yeah.
But this is
next level.
Really puts things
It puts it in perspective.
It
does make you think, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the power of fiction, looking at real psychology.
Yeah.
Through these fictional stories. We can grapple with these complex issues in a safe space,
It's true.
And it's entertaining.
Entertaining, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's
bring it back.
Let's bring it back to what we've learned today. We started with this research paper that diagnosed Hannibal
Lecter with ASPD.
Yeah, using actual clinical criteria.
Real clinical criteria. Yeah. It's not just like a casual observation.
No.
This is a real deep dive
into why and how he behaves the way he does.
Yeah, I love how they went beyond just labeling him.
Yes.
Like we said, they went into potential root causes.
Yeah, through psychodynamic theory.
Through psychodynamic theory. And they really pointed out how
those early childhood traumas shaped him as a person.
It's just mind-blowing to think that, something that happened to him when he was that young could have that much of an impact.
A lasting impact on his personality.
And obviously, we can't condone,
of course,
his actions.
No.
As an adult.
We can condone them.
But I do think it adds another layer.
It helps us understand
why he is the way he is.
Through the story.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that,
a reminder that
even these extreme behaviors.
That even the most extreme behaviors
often have a backstory.
They do.
It doesn't excuse anything.
It doesn't excuse them.
It is definitely something to consider.
But it encourages us to think a little deeper.
Yeah. And then there's that twist.
That twist.
Where they say that.
Even Hannibal Lecter?
Yeah. He could potentially be treated.
Possibly.
So.
Yeah.
That was really fun to go down that rabbit hole of.
Yes.
Exploring different treatment approaches.
Cognitive therapy.
Yeah.
Medication. Imprisonment.
The realities of imprisonment.
Right.
And I think we both agreed that.
I think we did.
Treating ASPD.
Is very, very.
Especially in cases severe Hannibals.
Yeah.
Would be incredible.
Especially in his case.
Challenging.
Very challenging.
But then we also went on
that detour. That brilliant detour.
Into Clarice's psyche.
Into Clarice Starling.
So this paper, it was focused on Hannibal.
Yes, it was.
But it really did spark.
But it opened a door.
A whole other line of inquiry.
Her questions.
Right.
Like what makes her tick?
Yeah.
How does she navigate this world?
Yeah. What makes her tick?
Without falling apart.
How was she able to go toe to toe with this guy? With
Hannibal Lecter.
And not just,
survive.
And thrive.
She thrives.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's amazing. And that's what I love about these deep dives is that.
The beauty of storytelling.
Yeah.
And psychology.
And it never really ends. Never ends.
Like the
questions never stop.
We could do a whole other deep dive on Clarice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So much to explore.
Yeah. We got to save that for another time.
We are.
And, this is what I love about.
So great.
This is that,
it makes you think.
We start with a topic and then
we take you curious.
Just keep going. Deeper and deeper.
You start to see the world differently.
Yeah. It's so cool.
I think that's a great place to wrap it up.
I think so, too.
So anyone out there who's watching The Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
Remember. It's not just a
thriller. It's a window into
psychological
the human mind
puzzle.
Yes.
It's a psychological puzzle box.
A puzzle box.
And it's full of intriguing questions
about human
nature.
About human nature.
The impact of trauma. And, that delicate balance between good and evil.
Good and evil.
And maybe you'll start to see.
The
Clarice Starlings.
Some Clarice Starling.
In your life out in the world.
And hopefully not the Hannibal Lecters. But yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
On this deep dive, we'll be back.
We'll be back soon.
With more
sources.
Another stack of sources.
Yeah.
And another intriguing.
Another deep dive.
Topic to explore.
For sure.
Until then, keep those minds curious and those questions coming.
Keep thinking.